So at the beginning, it was very difficult. I mean to enter into very concrete discussions because you start to have your prototype. As a robotician, you understand what it is, where it will progress. But then when you go to a user, they don't really understand where you are. We had multiple times responses like, okay, but that's just a research project. That's nothing that could be used very, very soon. So at the beginning, it was hard to find the right direction to have a discussion with them. But after several attempts, you start to have like concrete feedback.
Welcome to Deep Dive, the podcast where we will explore the ins and outs of managing deep tech products. I am your host Ravi Sundaram, and we'll be talking to product leaders about the intricate and innovative process of transforming cutting-edge science and technology into products that shape our future. Join us as we learn from these industry-leading experts on how to turn groundbreaking scientific discoveries into tangible real-world experiences. Today we have the pleasure of hosting Quentin Francois, the VP of Product and first employee at Robeauté. Quentin's diverse background and experience makes him a perfect guest to discuss the challenges and triumphs of navigating early stages of deep tech product development. He holds an engineering degree in mechatronics from INSA Strasbourg and a PhD from Sorbonne University in microrobotics. His PhD was conducted jointly with Robeauté, focused on tracking of their innovative microrobots. He went on further to build his knowledge by pursuing a business foundation certificate at NCEL, demonstrating his dedication to bringing the technical and business sides of innovation to market. Quentin and team are doing some fascinating work in developing a healthcare technology. Robeauté is a company tackling complex challenge in the surgical tech space using robotics. And Quentin has a unique perspective on navigating the early stages of deep tech product discovery. It's challenging enough to crisply define the future healthcare products, but now with surgical robots in the mix, we are talking about really deep tech territory. So we talked to Quentin about the nuances of developing early visionary customers and using their input in finding the right application for your technology. Welcome, Quentin. It's a real pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you.
So maybe we can start with understanding about your company and what you're doing. I know you're developing a groundbreaking product in the healthcare space. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the technology behind Robeauté and the problem it's aiming to solve.
Yes, for sure. So the broad context is the neurosurgery. So we are developing a micro-robotic system, which is micro because we want to intervene into the brain, and the cells, the neurons into the brain are very small. So the ultimate ambition is to create a micro machine that is able to intervene at the level of some cells, and even perhaps at the level of the unique cells. So the challenge in terms of the technology is to downsize everything into something that is big, that is small as a grain of rice. So I have one that you can see here. So if we compare with my finger, that's approximately this size. So into that you have an engine, you have a system to turn, you have electronics, sensors and actuators to carry out tasks into the brain. So the idea is to send the surgeon into the brain for him or her to be able to do multiple simple tasks like delivery, measuring, or burning, or stuff that they do currently. And we want to solve the problem of access because currently when you go into the brain, even the best surgeon in the world are limited by the 1D approach. They are working with needles, so they need to separate the brain and create a channel to go deep. And so that limits the fact that their ability to do multi-point intervention, and they have large limitations in terms of invasivity, I would say. So all the field is turned around these limitations, and we want to unlock multiple limitations due to this lack of access for measuring, doing steps with the micro robots.
That's fascinating. So a real limitation in access and limiting damage you're solving using technology across microengineering, microfluidics, and actually actuating robots. This is really cutting edge stuff. Really interesting. Before we move on, so in such a high tech company with various fields of discipline, maybe for our audiences, you can give us an overview of your role as a VP of product. What do you do across the functions?
Okay, so at the beginning, when we started Robeauté, we started from a full research perspective, I would say. We did our own research into the company. And so there was no product development at this point. We started by doing the first prototypes, proving it worked. And then when we arrived at the point where we had a full micro robot starting to work, then the question is, you have the technology, you know that you solve the access, but in the medtech space, you need an indication. And so the product development started by this point, by studying the markets, I would say, the users, what are their problems, and the concrete question when just arrived, like, do we start with brain tumors that are killing people today in less than 2 years? Or do we go directly to Alzheimer's, Parkinson's? Like such questions about what is the first problem you want to solve, and then it will guide all the company and the team towards the definition of the MVP, I would say. So it started like that, and the second aspect is also creating a strong network of users, because in the deep tech and medtech space, the users are not everyone. They are deeply specialized in a domain, and so that's not very easy to access them. So we started from the beginning to create a network of tens of surgeons, and then discussing with them what are their problems, how they envisage the future, and stuff like that. So that's everything I do. It's basically, currently we are cut in two parts into the company. We have the research team. They are like inventing technologies, and then it goes on the side of the product development, the product, where we need to align the technology with a need and with an indication.
That is brilliant. So as a lead product manager, you're cutting across, understanding the markets where and defining the segments where you want to enter first, and also defining the early customers with whom you would do your feedback loops, and then aligning the technology to the product. That's quite a diverse role, which is absolutely what a product manager should be doing. So very interesting. Maybe we can drill a little bit further on your journey. You're obviously working on an absolutely fascinating application. You mentioned when we spoke earlier that you spent the first 5 years developing the technology platform at Robeauté. Maybe you can take us through the process and the feedback loops you conducted with the surgeons during this period. How did that shape the final product and the user experience? Maybe take us through the process.
Yeah, so at the beginning it was very difficult, I mean, to enter into very concrete discussions, because you start to have your prototype. As a robotician, you understand what it is, where it will progress. But then when you go to a user, they don't really understand where you are. We had multiple times responses like, okay, but that's just a research project. That's nothing that could be used very, very soon. So at the beginning, it was hard to find the right direction to have a discussion with them. But after several attempts, you start to have like concrete feedback. Typically, you bring a micro robot, even if that's just a mock-up, and they are able to then, okay, that's this size, that's how I should control it. And you start to have like discussions about concrete elements. But then, even if that's successful, I mean, each user, when it's not very concrete, has his ideas and he's pushing you into his domain and his preference or preference. And that's at the beginning that was a bit hard because we didn't have the discussion were very open. So we learned qualitative feedback, but it was hard to align everyone. And so but I would say that's the beginning, but that was not very easy because at the same time you need to raise funds. You need to converge rapidly towards a story for everyone to understand what you are doing and what is your aim. But then I think when it started to be very efficient, I would say, is that when we started to iterate on specific subjects. So we had multiple subgroup of users, I would say. Surgeons around atypical aspects of brain tumors, surgeons around electrodes, stuff like that. And we were able to enter into the details of each sub-community. And in the medtech, it's that's doctors. So they are trained by a peer, I would say. So it's very something like there is different schools into the world. Someone does like that. So if you are trained with him or her, you do the same. And so when we started to understand this field, so of understanding your users then and the markets, how they are shared into the world, what are their relationships, then it started to be more concrete. And then we decided to focus on one indication, but finally it wasn't the good one. And so we started to iterate like that having discussions on a specific indication, and then, okay, that's not the good one because and then we switched to another one. But it was very time consuming and very long. And I think the main reason of that is that because we bring a breakthrough technology, and so it was hard for the users to understand what was possible because we didn't have a real full demo at the beginning. So yeah, so I think the beginning was a bit hard because you didn't have your MVP to discuss, and so you have to do with what you have and start to iterate on that. So it was a bit frustrating, but also it allowed us to start from the beginning. And then when we were ready, we had sufficient connection, sufficient knowledge about the basic aspects, I would say, of the platform. And then key subject emerge, like with the microbot, you're bringing the 3D possibilities, so you can turn into the brain. But today, that's not done. So how do you do that? The problem is that also you send the surgeon into the brain. So you need a user interface for the surgeon to navigate precisely. But then how do you do that? Because currently, they have the direct visualization when they operate. So typical product subject, I would say. And that's, I think we learned that these subjects are important because we discussed with them from the beginning. But at the beginning, we didn't know what to expect from this discussion. So that emerged. And that was then the first phase, I would say, allowed us to focus on specific subjects that are key for the platform. Yeah.
That's an amazing journey. So your message there is actually to go early to your at least your key stakeholder, your key customers, and engage even with parts of your technology so that you iterate and discover the unknown unknowns, which you only get along the way, and you build on that feedback. That is
they allowed you to focus, I would say, on specific points that perhaps you didn't expect that are very important.
Excellent. Maybe a follow-up on that would be when you do approach initially, you would have, as you said, you didn't have your MVP. How do you motivate the end solution to your customers or your stakeholders? Do you paint a picture?
So at the beginning, it was mainly slides with designs to explain. it was hard to explain the real end product, I would say. So what we decided, or what we did, that we were a bit forced to do that, is we discussed more with surgeons open to innovation, because we met several surgeons that if they don't have something very concrete that already works in their hands, they are not able to answer. They were blocked. So we did a small filter on that at the beginning, to have more visionary surgeons open to the discussion. That's how we try to advance. And then the one example is, I think it was almost 1.5 years ago. We went to the US to discuss with surgeons there, and we decided to do a very simple application, a software for the user interface to test the reactions of the surgeon on that. And it was intentional that it was not really good, but just for specific reaction to emerge and to see what is important for us, for them, then for us. For example, we gave them a PS4 controller connected to a computer with the user interface of a simple brain, and we didn't create function for the orientation. So you didn't saw the orientation of the micro robot, or basic stuff like that. And then they tested that. Some of them were very good, and some of them were very bad. But then the important point is that their reaction during this test, and they didn't know that we measured their reaction, because they thought that the most important fact was if they succeed in delivering the good control of the microbot, but that was not the point. And so the thing is that we started by doing some extract of the product, I would say, and we focused on these key points that we know are important to then inform the next step of the development.
Excellent. It's an excellent case of trying to break the forming of any biases. You're almost trying to do a negative control as well in your user experience. This is really, really useful advice and really insightful on how you went through it. Maybe we can pivot to a related subject, which is you mentioned before again that you had a core design approach from the beginning. Why did you have that, and why did you prioritize that early on, which kind of is in maybe slightly counterintuitive to what we just discussed in terms of going through? Maybe you can elaborate on that.
So the basic need at the beginning was that we are doing something very new, and so there is no comparable. And when you start into the product world without comparison, I was a bit lost, I would say. Because you can't say, okay, we start by this point, we do the same, and then we evolve from there. So we needed to, I would say, to draw a vision where we want to go. And by the discussion internally with Bertrand, the CEO, we decided to draw this vision by working with Bertrand, because that's his vision, that the vision is part of what was the beginning of Robeauté, what he saw at the beginning to start the company. And we work with designers, external designers, to then create a concrete vision based on what Bertrand thought at the beginning and what the team thinks. And so we did at the beginning, I think, a workshop of one full day where we separated the team in 3 sub-teams. And each sub-team had to draw a very strong vision around a theme, a subject that we decided together at the beginning. So for one, we decided to have a scenario around surgeons that are operating from the other side of the world to, for example, from Asia to the US. And so they drew something with a full VR headset, and that they were sent into the brain of the patient on the other side of the world, and they enter into such details like that. And we are the two other sub teams on other subjects. So we started like that. We aligned all the team on this vision. Everyone agreed on that. And then we started to, I would say, simplify this vision and arrive to a product that we can have in some months or in some years to start with. And so we drew these 2 points, the final point of the vision, I would say, which is infinite in terms of time, and the starting point. And that's how we align all the team on this aspect. And we think that the design is the only way to do that.
That is such an excellent point, because everybody has a grand vision, and that in itself is not enough. You've not only aligned your team to the vision by the process that you've followed through, but you've anchored them on anchored all of yourselves on that design, which obviously has links to real products. It's a very insightful process. Thank you for sharing that. Maybe we can talk further into the iterative process. I mean, that's something that is core to what you've described so far. Especially in this kind of technologies where each iteration is probably quite involved, and you have to change quite a few things and bring in technologies. Or maybe you can talk about the process itself, and what were some of your key learnings of this iterative process, and how did you navigate this with your team, especially the technical teams?
Yeah. So one of the key aspects, I have a good example of that is the inserter of the microrobot. So the thing that the element that the surgeon placed on the head of the patient. So now it looks like that. So it's very simple plastic part. But at the beginning, it was like a huge machine that we placed on the head. It was very complicated, and we saw that it was something done by an engineer for an engineer. And when we started to give this element to the surgeon, we started to see that's not working, definitely not. And so we had multiple iterations with the surgeon that we are working with, and it could be very basic, like you give them the 3D printing, part, and just explain how it should work, and they give you feedback. Then you can go further. You can test it on a 3D printed head or something like a mock-up, just to see how they behave with that. And we started by iterating like that. We even brought these elements to trials in the OR to see how it works. And the last iteration that we did on that is a discussion with the regulatory bodies. So we brought the prototype to the FDA in the US, and it allowed us to see how they react and what are their feeling about what we are creating. And it allowed us to see that what we did at the beginning wasn't the good solution. For example, so what I showed you is just part of the system that we conceived, and we cut the system in 2 parts. One non-invasive placed on the head, and one very simple placed below the skin of the patient, and that could stay. And so we created this system thanks to the iteration. There was no idea at the beginning from the team that could be done like that.
That is brilliant. Maybe a follow-up there is, you mentioned about the regulatory stakeholders. Can you share what other challenge that brings? We know it's a long cycle with especially invasive products. Is there something that you learned from that process that would be useful for us?
I would say, to begin on this question, is that it's reassuring that it's complex and long, because you don't want to be operated with something not very validated. So I would say that it's a good point, that it's complex and long to be validated. But the problem, I would say, is that the timeline of the regulatory bodies and the tests that you need to do are not the timeline of the investors and the funds that you can use to execute that. And so the problem is the misalignment of these two narrative, I would say. And so currently, what we have done is that we use the possibility to do tests, not for a regulatory perspective, but just as feasibility tests to demonstrate that our systems are working. But we are not ready yet to go, for example, to biocompatibility regulatory tests that are done in a good way. That's called good laboratory practice in English. And so we do like pilot tests to prove that's feasible, and even that could be a good way to inform the iteration on the product because it's not fixed before that. So you can use that. The problem then becomes an ethics problem, I would say, because you don't want to use too much live animals. There was a story around that, around Neuralink with Elon Musk. That was published by Reuters, I think, last year. So yeah, you typically as a product person move between different perspectives and different needs. If you're in the shoes of an investor, you want the more tests as you want as possible to prove that's feasible and that there is the technology. But as a regulatory guy, you want to limit the risk, and so you just want the system to be fully validated in all the aspects. So you need to draw like a strategy to start to have information to for everyone to be happy with that. And I think in medtech is particularly complex because you have multiple stakeholders that you don't have in other aspects of the deep tech, perhaps. But even in deep techs, you have some domains that are very regulated too. So yeah.
Brilliant. I mean, it's such a fascinating role that as you rightly put, you have to take the perspective of the various stakeholders, from regulators to your early customers to your technology, and decide your strategy and use your iterations to build your strategy. Obviously, for everybody, you're de-risking. The risk profile changes for everybody. That is absolutely great learning. Maybe moving forward for Robeauté. Briefly, what are you looking for? What would success in the near and long term look like? Well, long term it's clear, but maybe the near term.
So we decided what is the first application that was decided 2 years ago, and then we changed last year. Thanks, by the way, through the iteration with the FDA and the surgeons and the multiple stakeholders. And we arrived at an application which is the biopsy. So it's a way to go into the tissue, take a small amount of tissue to then do measures to see what type of tumors the patient has, what are the genomic information, the mutations, and all of this stuff that could inform the choice of the therapy. So we start with that because it's the easier step, I would say, for us, because that's an operation below 24 hours. So the requirements of the regulatory is the lowest, because if you decide to develop directly a microrobot for the vision, you stay with the microrobot during 2 months in the head of the patient, it will be very high in terms of the barrier of the test that you have to do, and then it will increase the funds that you need to use. And so we decided that we will go with this application. And at the same time, we are reaching the point where we will have the final product ready. So the MVP, we call it the final product because in medtech and probably in other domain, when you have the technology ready, you fix it because it's too costly to iterate on that after that. Sure. So we will fix the design this year with the final microrobot, so this one, which is the first product. And we will move forward with a regulatory test and execute all the steps to reach the first in human at the end of next year. And to allow us to do that, we need to raise money. So we are preparing a Series A of 15 million that we can extend to 20 million if that's possible, to prepare the second indication, which is the natural following, I would say. The microbot will be able to deliver drugs at the same time. So our idea is to create a platform that is able to first measure, inform the choice of the therapy, then deliver in multiple points, and even after that to stay into the brain to monitor the therapy, and then create a closed loop system. Because into the brain currently, thanks to the interview that I did with surgeons, we know that's very key. For example, we learned that brain tumors are mutating so rapidly that you need to change the therapy each 6 months if you want the therapy to stay efficient. And currently that's not done because we don't have knowledge on that. They are just discovering that. So that's a way, that's another point that could be useful, is to continue to do interview, because then you can stay at the top of the state of the art, which is always key in deep tech, because that's moving very fast. And so, so that's the current, I would say, challenge or subject that we are dealing with.
Excellent. So I think it's such a great mix of proving your technology for your early biopsy product and raising your next investment to continue. But equally, I really like what you said, that you need to go back to the iterative process and keep ahead of the game, because both the understanding of the diseases plus the technology itself is moving at such a rapid pace. A great example of continuous discovery and iteration. Very cool. Before we start winding down, maybe do you have one advice to others, or actually one advice that you would tell your own self if you could go back in the past and you were just starting this journey?
Perhaps one that could have saved a lot of pain, I would say, is that to not fall in love with your first product or your first indication, your first ideas. Because when you go along the way, you see that even if that's not perfect, and that if you create prototypes that will be destroyed, or it will serve the next one. And that's a continuous process, as you said. You continue to learn, you continue to build something. And if that's not, I think the problem is when it stops and when you are staying at the same level. So if that if that the a continuous development process, continuous innovation process, that's good. But then the problem is that if you fall in love with one of your product or one of your prototypes, it will be hard to move to the next one. So perhaps that could be a good advice, to know that from the beginning what you will build won't stay forever, and you will evolve what you are doing.
Such a great advice. Yeah, don't fall in love with your first product, even though that's the baby, isn't it? That's the first one that that came out of your technology. Iterate further through your customer feedback to get to the next 10 better products and keep going. Great advice. All right, then before we wrap up, I like to ask my guests a couple of light questions. One is, do you have a book recommendation for people, perhaps to put it in my empty shelf here, that inspired you either for the technology or for product management?
Yeah, so at the beginning, I read a lot about Marty Kagan. So he has edited several books. It helped me a lot, because currently in deep tech, this iteration process, as we talked, is not very well known. It's not very used, I would say. I remember that at the school, I even learned about the V program, so the V process, and not the iteration one. So that helped a lot at the beginning, but I'm not sure that's something that is top of the state of the art right now. But yeah, currently there is no, that's part of what you are creating, I would say. There is no typical person that is known in the deep tech world as a product guy that is a product reference. So perhaps the reference then is still Marty Kagan, what he's doing at Silicon Valley Product Group, but then I hope that someone else will pop up and emerge as a reference to create references for the deep tech team, I would say. Yeah.
Absolutely, and you're right. That's part of the reason why we started the community as well. Marty Sagan, absolute hero. It's there. Inspired is there in my bookshelf as well. Yeah. It's a good fundamental for everybody to start with. Good advice. But yes, we are as we are reinventing this for deep tech. We are learning. There are quite a few similarities, but there are some nuances that needs to be learned, and that's great. Maybe a last question on a deep tech area outside of yours that is most exciting to you.
You mean a project or anything into the deep tech
technology world, any technology that is not healthcare, that is not your core expertise, that you're really excited about?
I would say that what I was studying last year was all the technology around blockchain. That's more about the software, I would say. And I deep dive very, very fast into the subject because that was very fascinating. And currently, I would say that the AI is the obvious subject. And what is fascinating, I would say, no. What is the subject, I would say, which will be key is the combination of AI and the real world. So the robotics, for example. And so how we can combine all this new algorithm, this new way of computation to drive robots to then, that could be typically the self-driving car, that all these subjects, I think for me would be the future. And perhaps in healthcare, the other subject is then how you measure your body on the day-to-day. So all the metrics to prevent disease, and we try to understand a lot thanks to that. So I would say that's the other subject that perhaps I would start to study because that's a new frontier, I would say. Yeah.
So brilliant. Quite a few subjects, blockchain to utilization of large language models by real world robots to do something useful, to actually using the data that is being produced by this kind of devices that's all around for actual healthcare insights. Brilliant. All exciting stuff. And yeah, looking forward to seeing some of that evolve over the next few years. Right. Before we finish, Quentin, you've been extremely generous in sharing your insights. If listeners want to get in touch with you or learn more about Robeauté, how can they do that? What is the best way to reach you?
So if you want to learn generally about Robeauté, you can go to this website. There is a contact mail, I think, or you can contact me directly. So that's my first name, Quentin, in French, at robeauté.com. That's a way to contact me, but you can also go on LinkedIn, go on my profile, or go to the page of Robeauté. We are sharing news, and we will start to share a bit more because we are almost ready to share the first product information. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Quentin, thank you very much. This was a fantastic conversation with so many technologies, so many stakeholders, and your journey of iteration was very, very insightful. Thank you for sharing your story and your wisdom, and wish you all the best.
Thanks for having me. Thanks.
If you like that conversation, please subscribe. You could also engage further by joining the deeptech.syndicate Substack and Slack channel via the link in the show notes. You'll be tapping into a network of the brightest minds in deep tech product.